my cursor moving on the second screen? Can you see it? Can you see my cursor moving on the screen?
I see it.
Okay, good. See, anyone sees it, everybody sees it. Okay. So this is the email I sent to everyone. Actually, we sent it to Dick because for some reason he didn't get it. And so what's been going on? So lots of things have been going on. One issue of the ProRate Energy organization has been participating in the DER docket, Distributed Energy Resources docket. And so,
Well, can I ask you a question?
yeah, go ahead, Richard.
No, excuse me. I was talking to Cynthia. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so this docket came into existence in December, like about 8 months ago. And so
Okay.
we've been active in it, and we have a different idea of what should happen. But let me just make sure everybody knows. We've got Richard Jenkins and San Antonio, Richard Schmidt in New Orleans, Brendan Moore in Metairie, which is the suburb of New Orleans. Spaceman Chris is in North Carolina, and Richard Troy, which doesn't show up with a name. All you see is his phone number, his phone image, and he is signed in on his cell phone. Okay, so anyone who wants to jump in, don't wait for me to invite you. Please just jump in. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to jump into this. Okay, so who is Natalie Jordy and why do we care about what she says? So Natalie Jordy is the person who started this thread. So we go back to the beginning of the thread. You see Natalie Jordy is the author right here. And all these people here on this list, this is the list of everyone who is a subscriber to this particular docket. And you'll see my name is right here. Okay, so I am literally representing ProRate in this docket. The docket is the Distributed Energy Resource docket of last year. I think it's UD 2402. Anyway, she wrote to that docket this email, and she also wrote it to the city council people. That's why their names appear. See attached memo from Together New Orleans and the Alliance for Affordable Energy. And those two names match the acronym I gave in the title. See, Together New Orleans and AAE. Okay, so, and otherwise I chose her name, her subject field for the email. Okay. And she said, please read the attachment. She says, we think these three most essential provisions must be in the DER program to truly deliver to the city. And when this was written, it was written in advance of the advisor's report, which actually came out a few days before this particular email. And she says the council faces a rare and consequential opportunity to shape the future of resilience, equity, and affordability in New Orleans. And so the Alliance and Together New Orleans can rightfully assert that they're committed to working with the council to make a plan that would actually work. But they don't want one that won't meet various core principles, and she tells us what they are. So let's look at what they are. And so you go back to the end of the email, and here's the attachment. So hope everyone read it because it's not a long attachment. And I gave you a list of things that I think we should talk about tonight. Before I read her attachment, I want to remind you what I think we should talk about tonight, which are whether or not what she's saying is true, and why is it important, what's politically correct about it, etc. So let me get back to this and get to the top of this page. Okay, I said that we should, maybe this image isn't big enough, so let me change the screen resolution from 90 to maybe 150 or something, and get rid of this thing that clouds up the page so everybody can see what I said, namely that I think we should talk about tonight what are presented as facts by Natalie Jordy, that maybe aren't true. What are the political implications? which ratepayers stand the most to gain or lose by what we're talking about. Why does this matter and why now? And I also encourage you to bring your own list. If anyone brought something else to the list, please jump in and tell me what we should be talking about. But I'm gonna first dive into the attachment, which is on another page, I think. I don't know where it went, so I just open it up again. So here is the attachment. Okay, so let's look at what she said and what I think is dubious. I actually had a conversation with Kay Aiken this morning before I sent it out because I felt like I wanted to make sure it was on the same page. Kay Aiken is a new board member of ProRate and a leader in utility grid design and helped us propose what we actually proposed for this docket, which was not making a virtual peaking plant, which the docket does not require, but instead that we do planning instead. But we decided we didn't want to dump the Together New Orleans plan. We just wanted to add to it. So I can be more specific, but let's just get into this letter. So they writing on behalf of Together New Orleans and the Alliance, and they said the Alliance report is due on the 16th, actually was turned in very recently. And I will summarize the advisor's report in about 3 sentences. First of all, anyone who's been paying attention really in this docket knows that the docket had 2 requirements. Everyone was supposed to address themselves to whether the $32 million of SERI funds, doesn't matter what SERI stands for, it's off the point, whether that money could be used any other way than be giving it directly to the ratepayers. And if we could use it, what would you do with it to promote distributed energy resources in New Orleans? That's pretty much what it said. And every one of the interveners, except for Entergy, asserted that the SERI funds could be used anywhere the utility committee, the city council wanted to use it. On the contrary, Entergy said you can't use it any other way but giving it back to the ratepayers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what did the advisor say? What the advisor said was the utility is right. We cannot use the money any other way but give it back to the ratepayers. That's what the advisor said. And they gave all kinds of chapters and verse and law and legal opinions and experience and blah, blah, blah. And so we're foolish to think we could use the money any way we want. However, that said, he then went in to talk about what every one of the various interveners submitted and mentioned that we were intervener, but hardly mentioned that we were not trying to run a DER program. We were trying to change the way we plan, and didn't even talk about what we contributed to the meeting. But feeling slighted by that is not the point. But then they said, we gave Entergy New Orleans another chance to submit what they wanted, and they had a chance to do that, and they did it in March or April of this year, named a couple of months ago. And what they said is, if we could use the money that the SERI funds, even though we believe we can't, this is how we would do it, and they would do something very similar to what the AAE, the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Together New Orleans want to do, but we want to change the way we pay people so that the benefits accrue. So in order for you to vaguely appreciate what it is on the table, what happened is, and it becomes clearer when you go down to this description here. So what Together New Orleans and the Alliance wants to do is they want to use the existing demand response program. And for some of you, that's probably hard to understand what that means. A demand response program is a program where the utility pays customers to decrease their demand when the utility says, please, and tells you, in fact, you must, because they have electronic control of your appliances, like they can turn off your air conditioner or your water heater by pressing a button. And they pay you like $50 a year for the right to do that for 4 hours or 10 hours or 20 hours a year. And so everybody wins, apparently. Well, that's what demand response is. And they want to pair that with their battery pilot, which means they already rolled out a battery pilot, and the battery pilot generates income for the utility and the person who owns the battery through the same process, through a demand response process. And they already have a software developer who runs a demand response program. And that demand response program has a peculiar feature, which isn't necessarily in every demand response program, which it is a VPP. So let me go back to a key phrase over here, VPP. So what is VPP? We actually talked about what that was at 2 or 3 meetings back. A VPP is a virtual power plant or a virtual peaking plant, but it's definitely an aggregation of distributed energy resources. So again, if I'm blowing your mind, if you don't follow what I'm saying, if the terminology is not consistent with what you're comfortable with meaning, a distributed energy resource is a resource that's mixed within the distribution system. And it has the ability to make or use electricity, and you can manipulate that either as in response to prices, or you can do it in an aggregated way. And many people think that a virtual peaking plant or virtual power plant means it's orchestrated in an aggregated way. However, DOE does not define VPP that way. They define a VPP as any set of distributed energy resources that can respond to the price.
Myron,
Yes,
Myron.
yes, who's next? Richard,
Hate
go
to
ahead.
interrupt, but you seem to be moving on, and I maybe missed my chance a few seconds ago before you got into that last sentence or two
Go ahead.
to comment that virtual peaking plants and virtual power plants are two completely different things, and I look forward to the day when we have virtual power plants, which would basically mean we're not just using these distributed resources for the peak loads. We're using them all the time and getting rid of all this goddamn fossil fuel crap because we're feeding it with solar, that type of thing. However,
Amen.
it is correct to note, I mean, frankly, I think we should be very careful about the definitions here, and that's why I'm speaking up. It's the way that it is intended, it must be understood that in the current era, we're talking about virtual peaking plants, not virtual power plants. The transition to virtual power plants has yet to occur or even be seriously proposed, in my view. But I just want to throw that out there, and I yield the floor back. Thank you.
Hey.
Somebody else want to jump in? I heard somebody comment. I want you to know this distinction is not unimportant at all, and it plays a whole big role in the confusion of what we're talking about. At least one half of the people who support TNO's proposal, AAE's proposal, are talking about it as a virtual power plant, not as a virtual peaking plant. On the other hand, there are people who believe a VPP must have aggregated control, and DOE says a VPP does not have to have aggregated control. So let me just disassemble those three terms so you can follow what we're talking about. So if you have a group of distributed energy resources that are not in any way orchestrated, they could all respond to a price signal and use less electricity when the price is high and more when the price is low and less when the price is high, or even sell electricity back in sort of the way ProRate recommends. And that is a aggregation of distributed resources. And according to DOE's definition, a VPP can be that. However, most people think a VPP is either of the two things Richard said, which is either a virtual peaking plant or a virtual power plant. So what's the difference between the two? A virtual peaking plant is orchestrated in order to respond to a peak. For example, and those who don't live in New Orleans may not know that today we got an email from all the customers of Entergy, got an email today saying, tomorrow between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., New Orleans will have peak demand. We're just giving you a heads up. I don't know why they did it. I suspect they might do some load shedding, but they sent it out. So when you have near peak demand, you can expect the utility has to cut back on something. And one way to do it is to run your virtual peaking plant, which is a demand response program where you actually get people to lower their consumption, or if you happen to have batteries, to contribute power back to the grid. In some sense, one is equivalent to the other. That's what a virtual peaking plant is. And we actually had a meeting, 2 or 3 meetings back, that a guy in Australia says that a VPP always means a virtual peaking plant. If you think it means something else, you're foolish. And I'm not going to go down that road and talk about it now. Now, the
All
other,
right.
yeah, go ahead, Richard.
This is Dan.
Oh, Dan, go ahead.
Just curious. I didn't receive any notice from Entergy, so I'm
I
just
can't
curious.
explain that. I'll show you the email if you want. But anyway, let's go off on the side. So
I
guess-
definitely want to see that.
let me see if it was an email or a text message. Really quick. I don't know which one it was. Let me see if it was a text message. I don't see why I could get
I'm
to.
signed up for all the notices and I didn't receive it. But it may be that my feeders aren't being considered. I didn't lose power in the last brownout.
Okay,
I didn't receive it either, Mara.
I'm going to show it to you. And it occurred at 4 o'clock today. And go to the inbox. Okay. It's just interesting because here it is right here. Energy Smart. Okay.
Yeah.
Energy peak demand event tomorrow between 4 and 7 p.m. Okay, that's it. All right. So that's it. Just to say I wasn't making it up. Okay, let's go back to what we're doing. So now, okay, so there is 3 different issues on the table just with respect to what it is we're supposed to be talking about. The docket did not use the word BPP. It just said distributed energy resources. However, the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Together New Orleans asserted that meant VPP and have been going down that road, but not just any VPP, a VPP that would be pretty much a virtual peaking plant because it would only be used in the demand response program of the utility to lower demand during peak times. But however, it could be used at other times, and if it's used at other times, if it actually distributes power, like what Richard is talking about, it could be a virtual power plant. Anyway, unfortunately, you can't tell from the acronym what it means. So we'll go on, and that's not really where the problem is. You'll see the problem is much bigger than that. Anyway, he said there's significant room for compromise. So what is what is Natalie talking about compromise? What she's saying is the AAETNO recommendation has now been compared to the ENO recommendation. ENO, I guess I explained to you 3 months ago, they had a chance to nevertheless submit their recommendation of what they would do in the DER docket, and they did, and they came up with something very similar, but they distributed the benefits in a different way, and therefore they're not the same. Moreover, they want to run it, and Together New Orleans wants it to be third party. So let's talk about how it is. I think the real problems are not in the preamble, but in these 1, 2, 3 entries here. This is the first, and there's 2 more of these name things. So the first thing that Natalie pointed out, the program must maintain vendor neutrality. Unfortunately, this is not a text. I can't highlight it because they use a stupid version of PDF, which actually violates the utility rules nevertheless. So this is vendor neutrality. What they're basically saying is they don't want Entergy to own all the systems or to run all the systems, or at least run the DERMS. DERMS is Distributed Energy Resources Management System. It's software. So if it manages the system, that means it's the aggregator that controls all these devices that work together in an orchestrated way. So it's definitely either a VPP as a virtual peaking plant or virtual power plant. It's definitely not a program that's stimulated by prices. But nevertheless, that's how they look at it. Both Entergy and Together New Orleans look at it the same way in that regard. However, Together New Orleans and Alliance for Affordable Energy is complaining that they don't want Entergy New Orleans to be running the show because they will scoop up all the money and not make as much opportunity for other people, and you won't get as good a result for the same amount of money spent, which is basically what they're saying. And so they've been promoting vendor neutrality, and ENO talked nothing about vendor neutrality, and that's point number 1. But point number 2 is, in my opinion, the place where I wouldn't call them outright lies, but at least somebody doesn't know what's going on. So the program must make the DERs affordable for New Orleans customers and avoid magic thinking. So we're going to see what magic thinking is. There's a variety of interesting related issues associated in this paragraph about magic thinking. For this initiative to succeed, we must put distributed resources within the reach of ordinary New Orleans citizens, not just the affluent, which is really amazing to me that they actually said that sentence. Because in order for you to participate in this docket, you have to be willing to buy a battery and put up a significant percentage of that money. And we're talking about batteries that don't really make you any money except for a little marginal income because you avoided a cost. You can't use the battery to buy and sell electricity because you don't have bidirectional rates. So only a very
Myron, they're not talking about individuals for the most part here. They're talking about institutions.
well, even so,
And to your earlier point, what's the difference if it's always 13 cents a kilowatt?
say it again.
What's the difference if it's always 13 cents a kilowatt? We don't have time of use rates.
I'm sorry. I agree. We do not have time of use rates. And you mean
So
kilowatt hour, not
everything you
kilowatt.
say about prorate is meaningless.
I'm not focusing on prorate in this conversation. Okay.
No, but a minute ago you were.
A minute ago, I mentioned it, but I didn't say I was focusing on it. What I was trying to say is,
I'm not saying you're focusing on it either.
look, let's try to say what
The point
really,
is you were talking about how if we have batteries and Entergy has aggregated control of them, it's not going to help the person who has those batteries because they'll use them whenever it's best for Entergy, not best for that end user. But it doesn't really matter because we don't have time of use rates anyway. All it's going to do is make the grid more resilient and create resiliency for our community by giving us a place to go when the power's out.
okay, so let me correct some of the words you said. I think what you meant was it's going to make the grid more reliable. Okay, and not just more resilient, and that when we have a grid failure, we'll be able to have more people having a resilient experience. Let's make sure we understand the difference between reliability and resilience. Reliability means that we get to keep what we always want, which is electricity running all the time to everybody.
I'm saying both, Myron.
I know you are, but I want to make sure people know what those words mean because it's confusing the way you use it, in my opinion. So reliability means the grid always works and everybody has all electricity they want, as good or bad that is. Resilience is what happens when the grid goes down. How do we distribute that hurt over people so that no one gets hurt too badly? That's what resilience is about. This docket grew out of a unsuccessful resilience docket from 2 years ago, and ProRate was in it. And that was a docket that started in 2021 following the hurricane that began in that summer. So the response to that particular docket pretty much was by Together New Orleans to promote these community lighthouses, which like Dan said, puts the batteries and the solar on churches so that there's a small number of systems, but a large number of people who can benefit from it by walking at most a half a mile to find a cool place, food, and air conditioning. Okay, so that was their concept. And it's certainly better if we have more batteries and we have more resilience. And it's also possible those batteries can improve reliability if you use them in an orchestrated way in a demand response case. All that's true. However, in my opinion, what is completely ignored was the recommendation that ProRate made way back in the first resilience docket, that if we had a price system, it would automatically allow people to invest in batteries and would get more reliability and resilience for less income because the cost of the system would be paid out of ratepayer savings. But anyway, that is sort of one of the distinctions between what they said. But the real issue, and the reason why I said that is because they said not just for the affluent. In fact, unless you have a situation where you can get a battery, which only a church could do in an aggregated way. In fact, the average homeowner probably wouldn't be able to do this. So it's kind of, in my opinion, disingenuous to say just the affluent. But what's more important is the next sentence, which is patently false. For the next 2 years, federal tax grants and grant programs can be leveraged to cover 60% or more of the cost of solar and storage projects. But it is only possible if the program structure supports third-party ownership And in aggregation, it provides local upfront incentives that bridge the affordability gap. So that means provide the 40% where the federal government provide the 60%. But this sentence could have been written 4 months ago or 5 months ago before the big beautiful bill passed. But since the big beautiful bill passed, you cannot buy a battery system or even put solar panels on your roof to get any kind of tax credit from the the federal government, unless you do it in the next couple of months or weeks before this thing is set to expire.
It sunsets in 2027, Myron.
Not
20
according to what Kay told me today. She told me
Okay.
that these,
Well, look it up yourself.
she said the batteries only can be used in commercial installations. Individual ownership of batteries and solar are no longer supported by tax credits. That's what she told me this morning at 7 o'clock. Maybe I'm
Okay.
wrong. I haven't read it myself.
So are we talking about institutions here? I think
I
so.
don't know. I don't know how it distinguishes between institutions and individual ownership. She said that the only thing that's covered by tax credits are industry investments, not individual investments. That's what she
No.
said.
I don't think that's accurate.
Well, that's why I put at the beginning of the email, maybe aren't true, because I heard what she said and I didn't do the homework to confirm it. So that's right, maybe. So anyway, E&O's proposal fails to address the fundamental issue. Nowhere does it explain how low income and working families are expected to cover the 12 to 16,000. Remember, this is individual costs. 12 to 16,000 shortfall between E&O's incentive and the actual cost of the battery system. Not assume, and this is not institutions, this is single households. A plan that assumes households can build or finance these funds are hardest hit by outages and high bills. It's not a plan built for equitable deployment. I agree. It doesn't do equitable deployment, but in my opinion, although E&O's plan is less equitable, neither is the Alliance or Together New Orleans program as equitable as having the prices vary that cause the response. Okay, so that's issue number 2. Number 3, the program means aggressive enforceable deployment and timelines and protection from delays. And so they think we can do this by 2026 and maybe get these tax credits. So Kay doesn't agree. In recent decades, the ones subly deadly during long power outages, and the recent passage of federal only.
What doesn't Kay agree with?
Say it again.
What doesn't Kay agree with?
Kay does not agree that these tax credits can be are available to anyone but industry.
No, you were
after-
just reading the next paragraph, right? Weren't you on number 3?
I was reading in 2. I mean, I'm reading 3, like you say.
Right, and then you say, and Kay doesn't agree with that. So I'm trying to see what you're saying Kay doesn't agree with on number 3.
In number 3, the whole idea is if there already are no longer going to be accessible in some time soon, whether it's the end of this month or the end of this year, okay?
Myron, it's not a if it's this or if it's that. It's very clearly spelled out how it's being phased out.
Okay, so do you believe it's going to be phased out before the end of
It doesn't matter what I believe. There are facts that are written down, and those are the rules that we are going to
Okay,
follow.
you
And
know the
that's what
facts.
is, and
I'm
that's
just
what
saying-
these experts have written, and it pertains to those facts.
Okay, well, let's see. I don't know. All I can tell you, Kay said not, and I did not sit
Well,
down.
you ought to know.
And not, but all I can tell you what Kay said this morning.
All right.
And so, but I want to point out that one of the reasons why we took a different tack than Together New Orleans and the Alliance for ProRate Energy way back in the end of December was because we thought the problems facing New Orleans were way bigger than how you roll out a battery pilot or whether it gets incentivized with federal funds. Because at the time we made our alternative proposal, there weren't any shortfall or projected shortfall of federal funds for batteries or solar. We did not know we were about to get slammed that way. The reason why we proposed planning as opposed to this, because planning has many more benefits and provides more equity and provides more benefits at less cost. So that's why we propose the alternative.
Okay, Mars, my quick reading of this is, from solar.com is the source, and I don't know if that's good. But the homeowners 30% federal will be phased out, terminated on December 31st, 2025. The 30% solar tax credit for leases and PPAs, 48E, will be available through the end of 2027. Home battery storage will qualify for the 48E tax credit through 2032. Get your facts right, Myron.
Okay, so did I hear you say that residences can't get tax credits for batteries after the end of 2025?
That's what it says for the 30% federal 25D tax credit. 30% solar tax credit claimed by homeowners, 25D, will be terminated at midnight. The 30% solar tax credit for leases and PPAs, 48E, will be available through the end of 2027.
That's through leasing.
So the installation company claims the tax credit and passes it on to the homeowner through lower lease or a buyout agreement. So it doesn't expire for everybody and for everything at the end of this year.
Okay, well.
And then home battery storage will qualify for the 48E through 2032.
That's very opposite from what Kay said. I don't know what to do with this argument about differences.
What you do is you look into it
Okay.
your damn self,
So, I don't know,
Myron.
that's why.
I said, what you do is you look into it your damn
Yeah, that's
self.
why I wrote the word may. Okay, so that's why I wrote the word may at the beginning, because I had not looked into it myself. Okay, I used the word may.
You
Right
break it up a little, Myron.
Okay, may not be true. Okay, I don't know. Okay. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the political implications of this. Because sure, maybe they overstated the opportunity, maybe they understated. I do not know. I know what Kay said. I also heard what Dan said. It sounds contradictory.
I'd like to interject something important here before we lose track of it.
All right.
And that has to do with the equity part of this, that even Entergy itself is saying, oh, you have to give all the money back, and then maybe not. Well, I got to say, there ain't very much here that I've heard that is actually equitable in any fucking way whatsoever. And as a ratepayer who's getting screwed over even worse, I'm pretty sensitive to this question. And by the way, I'm paying the highest rates in the nation right now, and it's totally ridiculous. It's so bad that I did the math the other day and figured out that I can pay for enough solar collectors, not talking about the whole system here, 3 times my actual needs and pay it off in about 8 months. That's how screwed I am on my damn power bill. But at any rate, back to this docket, the whole purpose of the thing is to put the money back in the hands of the people who paid it and got screwed, and putting the money back in the hands of Entergy seems to me to be a major, like, what the hell, they screwed people over in the first place. We're going to trust them now again. That's where Together New Orleans, I think, or maybe it was the other folks, the Alliance people, where what they're saying is an outside third party is absolutely on the table, and we as a supporter of their proposal ought to be clamoring every which way that it can't be in Entergy's hands. But back to this point about, like, what are we spending our time here talking about this DER stuff? Let me rephrase this. How can this be shifted back towards the equity question?
Well, I think equity is important. It's just one of many issues. And I want to bring up another issue, which
Oh,
isn't.
wait a second, Myron. You're
Yes,
forgetting something.
what's that?
The only reason this opportunity is here in quotation marks at all is because of this minor issue that you're, one of many issues that you're talking about. Without the fact that all the people got fucking ripped off, I'm sorry, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. There was a judge who said, whoa, you're not just ripping off some of the people. Look at what are you doing? And there was a judgment. Okay, and we all know that the judgment is going to be much smaller than the real harm that was, that's just the system in the United States. The penalty is never as bad as the harm that was put. And that's on purpose, blah, blah, blah. That's a different dialogue. My point is that you just blew this whole equity thing off as, oh, well, that's one of many issues. And I'm saying that is the opportunity, if ever there was one, to hammer home a success here, because that is the whole freaking reason for this docket.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna tell you why I don't agree with you. Okay, the city council has shown itself over and over again. In fact, Dan mentioned that in an interaction we had over the last 2 weeks. Deja vu all over again. The city council experienced a power outage where we had to shed 26 megawatts in February of 2021 because of Winter Storm Uri, and we did not know how to shed with a scalpel. We shed with a machete, and instead of shedding 26 megawatts, we shed 80 megawatts, and we took down a lot of nursing homes. This is more.
I remember. I happen to remember. You can scroll ahead, please.
Okay, as a consequence, the city council created a docket to figure out how to do it with the scalpel. They never followed through. We never had a plan. So when Entergy was told by MISO 3 weeks ago, or whatever the date was, May 25th, to go ahead and shed 100 megawatts throughout the state, they didn't know how to do it, so they used the machete again. And the fact that we don't have planning caused a lot of mistakes. And planning.
All right. Okay. Now you're on to something. Now this is what we need to figure out how to hammer home. And I will remind those people who are in the audience that I'm not all sure who are, that this is what our assertion, where it really kicks in. And because what we're saying is you need to freaking plan better. Take it from there, Myron.
Well, it isn't just planning. Like, we are incompetent to do that. We were told, city council was told a decade ago, the best way to do a peaking plant or a virtual peaking plant is with rates. I said that in 2026 in integrated resource planning docket, and the response was, shut up. We want to build a peaking plant, and we're going to shut you down. We're going to build our stupid peaking plant no matter what you say. And that's what they did in 27 and 28 and 29. And that's why we got NOPS. And again, the same thing. This is really part of the same story. Whether you think it's the story about time of use rates, I know Dan's very much in love with time of use rates, and it doesn't have to be ProRate to get the effect. Any time of use rate will cause much of the effect that this DER planning process would do, without having to spend all this much money up front, because it would come out of the rates, these investments. Okay, now also want to talk a little bit about where the money came from. The money came from Grand Goof. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, way back in 1982, 85, 86, all in that time, they were building the power plants, Water for Three, Grand Gulf, and Riverbend, and I call Grand Gulf Grand Goof because the city council got stuck with 29% of the cost of running the power plant, even though we weren't 29% of Entergy Louisiana, or even 29% of Entergy, or even a smaller percentage of Entergy Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi. We got 29%. We got totally screwed, and as a consequence, we wound up having to pay that much for that power plant. Okay, well, guess what? That power plant stopped working an extended period of time, whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, I don't know, because it did. And when it did, everyone who paid into it got shorted on the income that the power plant generated. And that's where the $32 million came from. In fact, it was over $100 million, and they gave back all but the 32. And the judge says you have to give it all back. And the Alliance Together New Orleans lobbied the city council to hold back, put the finger in the dike, and save 32 million so they could run this whole docket. And their whole idea was to railroad a DER docket into a VPP docket, and they wanted to run it so that all these various players, those who like distributed power plants, and those who have solar panel companies, and those who have inverter companies, and every one of these people that they call are not going to be who are going to have their all piece of the pie. And those who even do DERMS, distributed energy resource management systems, namely the software, would all get a piece of this big pie, and they would all be getting benefits of it. And we pointed out in the docket that when you used a DERM, a distributed energy monitoring management system, then half the money of that could be captured by the whole process is taken away by the distributed energy resources operator. The aggregator takes half the income. And whether the aggregator is Entergy or the aggregator is any one of these third parties that the Alliance wants to do, it still takes the money out of the hands of the various people who contributed to owning these batteries. But you don't get that effect when you do the whole thing with rates. Okay. So this is all the background story of why we decided to promote planning as opposed to promoting the one that the Alliance wanted to do. On the other hand, we pointed out that putting some batteries in were a lot better than putting nothing. We had this much money, so we said, we don't want to take all 32 million. In fact, the Alliance Together New Orleans said, let's take the 32 million, spread it out over 3 years, spend $10 million a year. And we said, okay, you spend $9 million a year, give us $1 million a year to do planning, and we'll wind up having a much better plan with what we're planning to do. And that's what we're proposing. And we're still proposing it. But in fact, Andrew, our allies, namely Kay and Press, have been pushing behind the scenes with the Alliance for Affordable Energy and Together New Orleans to see if they would accept planning. And they really, really like planning, but they don't want planning to be in this docket because they think it's going to muddy up the docket. And we think if we don't do planning in this docket, we may not get a docket with planning. Okay, so that's where part of the problem.
Yeah, well, I would also state that it's a critical reason why, I'm not in their brains, but I'm going to pretend that I am because of economic interest, and it's fairly obvious that the money will be gone by then. It'll be, if it's not in this docket, then poof, there it goes.
Well, there's an argument that that's not true. Let me explain that argument. So what it takes to do planning might be $1 million a year. It might sound a lot to you, but this utility spends around $1 billion a year, and they spend $7 million on their own advisors and another 2 or 3 million on the Cure office. So $1 million on planning is within the discretionary opportunity of the docket of the regulator without there being $32 million sitting on a table somewhere they don't know what to spend it on. And then the demand. And earlier when I showed you something in the email, I should go back to that email real quick. This email.
All right, I get it already. You don't need to. Move on.
Energy Smart spends around $20 million a year, so we could easily take $1 million out of that thing and do it anyway. So it's possible to do this without this docket. But I want to go into the other things that I have on the list to talk about. We have 15 minutes left. I just want to quickly tell you about it. So what are the political implications? So I went to a meeting of one of the people running for city council. Her name is Amy McCarran. Doesn't matter who he is. She's running for city council in my district, District A. And I was trying to get her to talk about utility stuff, and she did a little bit more than what I got in a previous meeting with a previous person running for the same city council. See, she didn't know enough to talk about it. But what I did talk to is her advisor, a guy named Mario Zervigon, who I know the last name is the son of someone who was active in the Get Nazi Back program in 1982 when I ran it with others. And so I know this guy's deeply involved in understanding technology behind, moving forward on utility regulation, and that Amy McCarran would probably participate in the utility docket utility committee in a way more than most city council people would. So I was very interested in finding out what she had to say. And what what Mario Zerbagon said to me is, don't worry, I'm in good communication with Natalie Jordy. Okay, he doesn't even know enough to understand what's wrong with what Natalie Jordy is saying, and he's trying to and advise me that he's on top of the issues because he has good communication, Natalie Jordy. So what I find myself in a position is I say I am not going to let perfect be the enemy of good. So I think the Alliance Together New Orleans are trying to do a good thing to get batteries installed, but I don't think it's the best way to go. And the reason I talked already about how ratepayers will probably gain less by either the Alliance or Together New Orleans plan compared to Entergy, compared to a good rate design, which I think everyone in this room would prefer a good rate design. So how does this matter? Well, right now, as Christopher Faust told us a few months ago in a similar meeting, if we don't get involved in politics for people running for office now, when are we, and how can we expect those people to participate? And so I can say more, but I wanted to help people jump in. So I hope you understand what's going on. Dave or Dan or Tor, you guys want to jump in? I have a couple of more things to say, but I'm afraid I'm going to eat up all the time.
Yeah, I don't think any of the council people who are elected to be council members have a clue about utility regulations.
In fact, I recall that in an email thread saw recently, Andrew Gisolo, you might recall, is the guru who is the chief of staff for Elena Moreno. He thinks that city council does not have a deep enough interest or willing to break the standard procedure as a regulator to do anything out front. And as I said before, the utility runs by driving through the rearview mirror, and its regulator is the same thing. If no one else has done it first, they aren't going to do it. And if it's done someplace else, but only say Berkeley or Massachusetts, they're not going to do it. It's got to be done within 2 states of them and show a 3-year track record before they're going to try it. So it's very hard to move down this road. So that's one of the issues that's going on. So in order to get someone really involved, I've got to sit down with them and try to have a conversation. And Press has told me that I talk at so deep a level, everybody eyes glaze over when they talk to me, and I wind up getting nothing accomplished.
That's pretty true.
Yeah, it's probably true. So, but I want you guys.
Excuse me. I think if Dan had the time, he'd probably pull it off pretty easily. I've talked to him a good bit. I think he's sharp enough and by now fully informed, or at least well enough informed on these issues. I certainly wouldn't count Dan out as our advocate.
I appreciate that, but the problem really isn't whether or not we can get the ear of our council people. You know, the system is so broken because ultimately they make the decisions, and they're going to make decisions that are best for them, not necessarily for the constituents.
I would remind you that I'm 100% certain you will agree that people make decisions mostly for emotional reasons. Therefore, the question is, what kind of emotional reasons can we put forward here?
I appreciate that too. It's a good point.
I want to say one thing that's maybe it's a light at the end of the tunnel, but a few weeks ago, I think it was on. I think it was June the 12th. It was, I guess, a month ago. In a regular city council meeting, and to clarify things, utility committee meetings are usually 2 or 3 times a month on a Monday or Tuesday. But every other Thursday, the city council meets and rubber stamps the decisions of all the subcommittees, and sometimes take up some other issues. And so where a utility committee might take up 3 issues at a meeting, a regular city council meeting might have 100 issues in a meeting. And they just pass them really fast because they're on the calendar. But in this particular case, Elena Moreno and C.P. Morel put a whole new resolution on the table that had not been vetted by any committee. And what it was is they wanted to create a DER expert in the Curo office. Let me clarify those acronyms. Distributed Energy Resources Expert in the Constant Utility Regulatory Office. what has been for over a decade, maybe longer. City Council wants to create enough expertise in its own house at the Cure office to one day displace the need for the legal advisors they pay $7 million a year. But currently,
Hallelujah.
what
Hallelujah.
I know that's why they're doing it. However, they haven't really done it. They have never empowered anyone in the Cure office to make any opinions, much less opinions that might be adverse to the advisors. You never get them saying anything with a slant. They just try to give you the most objective statement without saying anything meaningful. And if the fact that the city council, two leaders decided that they needed a DER expert in the Cure staff is a clear indirect statement of saying, we don't trust our own advisors because they don't understand distributed energy resources. That's how I read it. And if one and one could be added together, if you looked at the actual report released by Entergy, the Dentons, on the fact that this particular docket couldn't go anywhere because their legal precedent said you had to give the service funds back to where it goes. But they didn't know what to do with the money because they don't have any expertise, shows that we are driving a ship without a rudder. There's no one who our advisors are who know anything about distributed energy resources. And if you look at the people who band together to support the Alliance for Affordable Energy Opinions, they know it substantially less. They don't know, for example, that when you do a VPP, half the money goes to the guy who runs the software. Okay. And so if you don't know that, you have no business having a conversation about how to do a aggregated virtual power plant if you don't understand the economics of it. Okay, so anyone who does say the right way to do is with a rate design. So we're saying, okay, we're not going to force you to do a rate design if you take ProRate's opinion. We will force you to make decisions. Look at the experts. We invite experts from all over the world to come give a plan to the city council, figure out how to do things, make plans, and move forward in the most economical and effective way. That's what we're shooting for. And I'd love to be able to sell that to any member who's running for city council today. But that's really,
As a complete aside here, but not an entirely complete aside, I already put together this proposal to the city council and stuff in response to blah blah blah. You know all this history. There were two times I did that, and I'm saying, well, at the very least, convince Together New Orleans and the Alliance to at least pick my company because I'll take less.
okay, let me tell you how deeply weak these guys are. When Brad Baggert proposed community lighthouses, I said to him, why don't you include community solar in your plan? You know what his answer was?
What's community solar?
Yeah, what's community solar? Right.
Yeah.
So it just shall show you. So what happened is that Together New Orleans realized they didn't have the expertise, so they hired one with expertise. But in fact, Natalie Jordan doesn't have the expertise. 3 years ago, she sat down with me and she said, I'd like you to hire me because I would like to start spending money as an energy expert. I am not an energy expert. You could pay me $20,000 a year and I'll become an energy expert on your behalf. Okay, that's where she was. Now she is the advisor for Together New Louisiana. Okay, what does that tell you? They don't need deep advisors to be the advisor for Together Louisiana. Okay, that's who we're arguing with, people who haven't done their homework. And I admit, I did not read the big beautiful bill. I fully admit that. And so I don't claim to know that. But I do expect that someone in the business like Kay, who's actually making batteries and selling them and going to technical conferences in order to sell things and actually lobbied effectively to her member of Congress, which was Susan Collins, to change the bill in the Senate so it wasn't as horrendous as it was in the House, that she has done her homework. So excuse me for being vaguely naive, if I was. So that's why I said maybe and not for sure. Anyway, so I know a little bit about my limits of understanding, and I hope I gave a broad view of what's going on so you can appreciate what we're doing. Now, we'll add one more thing. So Kate Press thinks that we could hire Mario Zervigon to get our proposal through the door. Namely, get the city council to actually consider the notion of planning as a key ingredient to either the DER docket or some future docket. And he wants.
I suggest you ask for $1.5 million or $2 million, because everything is more expensive now. You're living in the past a little bit, all right?
Well, I'm saying that he wants to come up with $5,000 to pay for Mario to do that. We can argue whether Mario should do it or not. And he wants us.
Well, all right. Look, I think I was responding to something differently. I'm assuming that you're going to do this if you possibly can. I'm saying up the ask from 1 million to 2 if you can, and settle for 1.5, because everything is more expensive now.
Well, the utility does just the opposite. They play down the cost of their cost of construction, and then they charge us 4 times the price as the construction continues. So lowering the price.
But they are in a monopoly position. What is the city council going to do? Sue them?
Right.
I mean,
exactly. But anyway, I wanted to put the proposal on the table before I run out of time. We still have a couple minutes, literally only a couple minutes. Press Kavakov said to me, he would like to hire someone like Mario Zerbegon to take our proposal, namely planning, through the city council process and pay him $10,000 to $20,000 to do it. And he said he's willing to put up $5,000. And he'd like me to get the ProRate team to each put up a couple $100, and then we could put in 5,000 to match his 5,000, so we can hire an expert. Now, whether that's a great idea or not, I feel like I'm obligated to put it on the table.
I haven't got it, but whatever.
What do you think, Dan? What do you think, Dave?
I don't have the money to contribute. I don't know Mario from anyone. So, I mean, I'd have to do my research before I made an opinion. But
Right.
my feeling is if it sounds like you're still going against what the Alliance and what Natalie with Together are going for. And even though you say you're not, you keep being critical of it only because you want to put in the study. But why don't you put a caveat in there and say, for all this money, there should at least be a time of use pilot for all the battery that get bought with this, and they should all be part of a time of use thing. And the money could go back into a fund as well as into those institutions and whoever gets funded, and do something that's regenerative with that money.
I like the idea. Can you put that in writing quickly and send an E?
Yeah, I really appreciate if you do that, Dan. I agree. Put that in writing.
Well,
we
I'll
can-
find the rate. I'll find a very basic rate design that already does that, and I'll forward it to y'all.
Okay, but it's not just the rate design. Your idea included that it would be generating money for which we could do more good things.
Exactly.
And that's part of that's more than a rate design. So I like it.
Right. Yeah, no, it would take a little bit of finagling, but the money wouldn't go to that aggregator. It would go back into a fund.
No, I'd like other people to speak. Richard Troy, Richard Jenkins, Dave Stetz, Tor. You guys want to chime in? You got a couple minutes. No, we don't. It's 9 o'clock.
I already speak up whenever the hell I want. So go ahead, boys.
Nobody's jumping up. Well, it's 9 o'clock, so we're supposed to shut down. So it's peace now or forever hold your speak. Okay, well, we're recording these things in case you forgot. We're recording this one, we recorded most of the last 4 or 5, and we're going to put them on a website, and Brendan will show you how to get access to it.
Thank you very much for the meeting. It was very good.